The president, it seemed, was starting his second term with a clean slate and could look ahead to expanding his China strategy and building on superpower détente. There was just one minor difficulty for Nixon: the trial in a Washington court of some rather unusual burglars. The Washington Post didn't usually put local burglaries on its front page, but this one, at the Watergate apartment complex on the Potomac River in June 1972, was not run-of-the-mill.
5 men, one of whom said he is a former employee of the Central Intelligence Agency, were arrested at 2:30 a.m. yesterday in what authorities described as an elaborate plot to bug the offices of the Democratic National Committee here.
The White House denied all knowledge and insisted that the break-in was the work of a few out-of-control political mavericks. Nixon himself claimed,
"What really hurts in matters of this sort is not the fact that they occur, because overzealous people in campaigns do things that are wrong. What really hurts is if you try to cover it up."
Wise words. If only Nixon had heeded them. Watergate wasn't a marginal event on the fringe of the Nixon presidency. It was a product of the hardball, paranoid politics that had got Tricky Dicky to the top and would now bring him down.
Technically correct. Do you think the President's New York Times is worried about all legal niceties?
Nixon probably didn't know about Watergate in advance, but he had sanctioned break-ins and wiretaps of opponents through his notorious plumbers. He had fostered the climate of illegality that led to Watergate. Nixon's siege mentality assumed that they were all out to get him. The Democrats, the press, the liberal establishment. Earlier in his presidency, he'd made a comment to Kissinger and some aides that was frighteningly revealing. "One day, we will get them. We'll get them on the ground where we want them. And we'll stick our heels in, step on them hard and twist, right? Henry knows what I mean. Get them on the floor and step on them. Crush them. Show no mercy." Following the Watergate arrests, Nixon was right at the center of a cover-up, which he delegated to the White House law officer, John Dean. In June 1972, on the pretext of national security, Nixon told aides to order the FBI But after the election, in 1973, Congress appointed a special Senate committee to inquire into Watergate.
The burglars who broke into the headquarters of the Democratic National Committee after Watergate were in effect breaking into the home of every citizen of the United States.
The burglars and their immediate bosses were prosecuted. The press followed up every lead, delighted to get back at the president. The hatred was mutual. The pressure was really getting to Nixon. His hands were shaking. His breath smelt of liquor. The den was becoming a bunker. It was like May 1970 all over again. But this time, there was no way back. His presidency and his personality began to fall apart. Nixon told Haldeman,
"You know, Bob, there's something I've never told anybody before, not even you. Every night since I've been president, I have knelt down on my knees beside my bed and prayed to God for guidance and help in this job. Last night, I knelt down, and this time I prayed that I wouldn't wake up in the morning. I just couldn't face going on.
Nixon was prone to melodrama and self-pity. But even so, these words probably came from the heart. The most powerful man in the world, custodian of the nuclear codes that could exterminate millions, could not stop the wheels of justice and democracy, gradually grinding him down. Yet the scandal dragged on for another 15 months because Nixon, a fighter all his life, would not give up.
It is my constitutional responsibility to defend the integrity of this great office against false charges.
Ironically, though, he sealed his own fate because this most secretive of presidents had documented his own crimes through his tapes.
We have a cancer within close to the presidency that's growing. It's growing daily. We're being blackmailed. I would say these people are going to cost $1 million over the next few years.
You get it in cash. I know where it can be done. I mean, it's not easy, but it can be done.
Throughout 1973, Nixon kept battling on two fronts. Still aching to leave his own footprints on the sands of time, he invited Brezhnev to Washington, hoping to keep up the momentum of his great diplomatic project, détente. But he was also fending off efforts by the Senate inquiry to subpoena his tapes. Watergate was now not only sapping his energy and health, but also undermining his political credibility. After re-election, he'd hoped to dispense with Kissinger, jealous of his cult status. Instead, the discredited president found he needed his respected national security advisor as never before, even appointing him Secretary of State as well. From now on, it was almost a co-presidency. No more so than in late October 1973, at the height of the Arab-Israeli Yom Kippur War. The crisis escalated into a major face-off between the superpowers. US forces were put on DEFCON 3, the highest level of defense readiness short of imminent attack. Yet the decision was taken not by the president, but by Kissinger. Nixon was asleep, and Kissinger took the decision not to wake him. Chief of Staff Al Haig asked if Kissinger had talked to the president. "No, I haven't," Kissinger replied. "He'd just start charging around. I don't think we should bother the president." Whether Nixon was exhausted or drunk is unclear. To save himself, the president had had to sacrifice most of the key aides who'd been at his side since the beginning. Haldeman and Ehrlichman had been forced out. And he was losing all authority, constantly harried in press conferences about the tapes, the cover-up, and even his personal finances.
People have got to know whether or not their president's a crook. Well, I'm not a crook.
Now the Lone Ranger really was alone. Forced to release the self-incriminatory tapes and facing imminent impeachment, Nixon finally resigned in August 1974. He told staff in a tearful, rambling farewell,
"Never be petty. Always remember, others may hate you, but those who hate you don't win unless you hate them. And then you destroy yourself."
The ultimate irony was that hate had become the adrenaline of the Nixon presidency. The ambition and ruthlessness that had driven Nixon to the top had spiraled into a consuming rage and mistrust of others that had indeed destroyed him. The presidency of the United States is an unforgiving role. Nixon wasn't the first president, nor will he be the last, to end his tenure compromised and discredited. The relentless pressures of office drill down to the vulnerable heart of the incumbent and expose it to the media's remorseless gaze. Since Nixon, the political strip show has continued. Carter, honourable but hapless. Reagan, amiable but out of it. Clinton, a presidency unzipped. Bush Jr., a presidency in terror. But Nixon stands as an exceptional case. Watergate wasn't a strange aberration. It was symptomatic of the back-channel, backstabbing methods by which Nixon's whole presidency operated. Methods that generated his international triumphs as much as his domestic scandals. Here was a presidency of the paranoid. And ultimately, it was this very paranoia that sank him in the form of his obsessively recorded tapes.
Henry, I just wanted to be sure that with regard to that Laos and Cambodia strike, that both the Rogers and Richardson are informed about it.
Congenitally unable to relax with success, Nixon had never allowed himself to enjoy his presidency. As Elliot Richardson, one of his cabinet, told Nixon early in the second term,
Mr. President, I believe your real problem is that you have somehow been unable to realize that you have won. Not only won, but been re-elected by a tremendous margin. You are the president of all the people of the United States. There is no they out there. Nobody trying to destroy you.
Richardson was part of that East Coast elite from which Nixon always felt excluded. He was also a D-Day veteran, tested in the furnace of battle, and evidently at ease with himself. Nixon was never satisfied with his achievements. He'd never come to terms with himself, with his unstable mixture of ability and ambition, shyness and suspicion. His problem lay deep, deep within. As the poet John Milton wrote in Paradise Lost,
The mind is its own place, and in itself can make a heaven of hell, a hell of heaven.
Nixon made his own heaven and his own hell. Just before lifting off from the White House lawn, Richard Nixon turned to give a farewell wave, arms outstretched, in that fake spontaneous public style of his. It looked like a final act of bravado. Nixon, the defiant fighter, giving a last deluded V for victory. But behind this humiliating exit, one senses something darker, the mantle of martyrdom. In Nixon's self-pitying, self-righteous mind, was this his moment of crucifixion?